محمد أشرف الخلق وسيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم إلى نور الفهم وأكرمنا بمعرفة العلم وزين أخلاقنا بالحلم يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم انفعنا بالقرآن العظيم، اللهم ارفعنا بالقرآن العظيم، اللهم احرسنا بالقرآن العظيم، اللهم اجعله لنا إماما ورحمة وقائدا وسائقا إلى رضوانك. اللهم البسنا به الحلل وأسكننا به الظلل وادفع عنا به النقم. اللهم ادفع عنا به النقم، اللهم ادفع عنا به النقم. اللهم اجعلنا ممن يقرأه فيرقى ولا تجعلنا ممن يقرأه فيشقى. اللهم اجعله لنا في الدنيا قرينا وفي القبر مؤنسا وعلى الصراط نورا وفي الآخرة شفيعا ومن النار سترا وحجابا. اللهم خلقنا بأخلاقه وأدبنا بأدبه واملأ قلوبنا وبيوتنا بنوره ورحمته وهداه. Allah, we call upon you, pray to you, beseech you. We ask you to bless us with understanding the Quran and to make us a people who reflect on the Quran and live by the Quran. We ask you, O Allah, to fill our hearts with the love of your book and the love of revelation and the love of your Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. O Allah, we ask you to make us of those who have profound understanding of the teachings of the Quran. Make us of those who recite its verses in the day and in the night, and make the Quran a comforter for us in our graves. Make it a nur for us upon the Sirat. Make it a means of elevation for us in Jannah, and make us of those who embody its character and fill our hearts and our homes with its nur and its guidance. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma ameen. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Amma ba'd, this is the last class on the surahs in Juz' Amma, the last chapter of the Quran. And we have two surahs for today. They're the last two, Surat Al-Falaq and Surat An-Nas. And with this, this series is going to conclude. And after it, we're going to take a pause, inshallah, for the month of August. And in September, we'll launch something new on Tuesdays, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. But we're planning to continue classes on Tuesdays, but we'll make new marketing for what we're going to do next, inshallah. These two surahs are among the most critical surahs in the Quran. And the reason why that is because it is a guidance on spiritual protection from harms. These surahs, Surat Al-Falaq and Surat An-Nas, are a guidance on spiritual protections from harms. Just as one takes measures to protect their body from physical harm, takes measures to protect themselves from the attacks or the oppression of another human being financially, the believer needs to consider the potential harms that may come to him or her through spiritual means. And what we mean by spiritual means are the impact of ayn, hasad, envy, or through sihr, black magic, or through satanic thoughts, the influence of the shaitan. Interestingly, the order of these surahs is as follows. After we have gone over Surat Al-Ikhlas, which is the surah that gives profound understanding of Allah's oneness, it gives true tawheed for the believer. We transition to seeking protection from Allah, from the evils of human beings and the evils of the shaitan. Now, the Surat Al-Falaq speaks about those evils perpetuated by human beings, right? So we have shayateen al-ins and we have shayateen al-jinn, right? We have devils from among human beings and devils from among the jinn. And if you were to compare which of the two are more harmful, more damaging, you will find that the shayateen al-ins, the devils from among human beings, are more harmful for the person than the devil from the jinn. Why is this? Because the devil from the human being does not run away when you remember Allah Azza wa Jal. To push away the shaitan and his influence is very easy for the mu'min. As the Prophet ﷺ, he says in the hadith, الشيطان جاثم على قلب ابن آدم. The shaitan is sitting upon the chest of the son of Adam. فإذا ذكر الله خنس وإذا غفل وسوس. The Prophet ﷺ says that when the son of Adam remembers Allah, the shaitan flees, retreats. He is a shaitan al-khannas, the retreating whisperer, as we're going to go over in Surat An-Nas, inshallah. And when he falls into ghafla and heedlessness, that's when he does his work. But the shaitan from among the human beings, Ramadan or not, dhikr or not, no matter what you do, if you don't have the protection, or I should say, if you don't have the strategy or the plan or the inspiration, then he may harm you or she may harm you. The shayateen from among, and we're going to learn this from the surah. So now let's get into the two surahs, some introductory things about them. Now, first off, these two surahs are referred to as al-mu'awwidhatayn, right? All right, so these two surahs are al-mu'awwidhatayn because they give protection. That's what awadh refers to. Mu'awwidh meaning it's ism fa'il. It gives the two protectors. That's what they're referred to as in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The hadith says, narrated by Sayyidah Aisha, كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا اشتكى يقرأ على نفسه بالمعوذات وينفث فلما اشتد وجعه كنت أقرأ عليه وأمسح بيده رجاء بركتها. The Prophet ﷺ, whenever he would feel something affecting him, what would affect the Prophet ﷺ? Again, the Prophet ﷺ, Allah taught us through the Prophet. Allah taught us through the Prophet. And through this teaching, the Prophet ﷺ needed to experience some of what human beings experience, so that we could learn as an ummah how to deal with it. So this hadith says that whenever the Prophet ﷺ would feel something affecting him, either affecting the mood or affecting him physically even, the Prophet ﷺ would read the mu'awwidhat and he would blow. And when he became very ill towards the end of his days, ﷺ, in this dunya, Sayyidah Aisha said, I would read for him and I would blow on his hand and then use his hand to wipe on his body because of the barakah that's in his hands. Again, teaching barakah, right? There's this idea called barakah. What's barakah? It's not bid'ah. This is not bid'ah. This is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. This is barakah, blessings. The Prophet ﷺ's hand had blessing. Riq al-mu'min, the saliva of the mu'min, when used to remember Allah, has a certain sense of blessings. This is what we call barakah. Again, established in this hadith and many other hadiths, right? So this idea, and it's not about the saliva, it's about the remembrance of Allah. Right? It's not about the saliva, it's about the remembrance of Allah Azza wa Jal. That's why when we're talking about nafth, what is nafth? All right, so we have a few different levels, right? We have something called basq. That's to fully spit in your hand. Basq. That's spitting with a lot of saliva. Then we have tafl after that. Tafl is to blow in your hands with a very minimal amount of moisture. And that minimal amount of moisture gets to your hand. Very minimal amount. Tafl. And then we have nafth. And that is to blow in your hands, moving your tongue, and not really causing moisture to reach your hands. Right? So this hadith says nafth, and other hadiths say tafl. Like if you were to seek refuge in the shaitan, you are to do tafl, blow to your left 3 times and seek refuge in Allah from the shaitan if you were to see a bad dream, for example. So another hadith that shows us a sense of barakah, right? When you remember Allah, كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا أوى إلى فراشه كل ليلة جمع كفيه ثم نفث فيهما فقرأ قل هو الله أحد قل أعوذ برب الفلق قل أعوذ برب الناس. The Prophet ﷺ would recite these 3 surahs 3 times each in his hands, and he would wipe it on his body. يمسح بهما ما استطاع من جسده يبدأ على رأسه ووجهه وما أقبل من جسده. And he would do this 3 times, as we said. This is hadith in Bukhari. It's an authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. There's another hadith that tells us about the virtue of these 2 surahs. This hadith is in Sahih Muslim as well. This hadith is عن عقبة ibn Amir. He says, بين أنا أسير مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بين الجحفة والأبواء إذ غشيتنا ريح وظلمة شديدة فجعل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يتعوذ بقل أعوذ برب الفلق وقل أعوذ برب الناس ويقول يا عقبة تعوذ بهما فما تعوذ متعوذ بمثلهما. Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, again, what is he saying in this hadith? The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم was in travel, on a journey. And this companion, Sayyidina Uqba, was with him. Suddenly, there was winds gusting, and darkness overcame them. It became very dark. And the Prophet ﷺ began seeking refuge in these 2 surahs. And he said to Sayyidina Uqba, Ya Uqba ta'awwadh bihima. Seek protection in these 2 surahs. Because no one could seek refuge in 2 things that are better than these 2 surahs over here, Surat Al-Falaq and Surat An-Nas. Now, this shows you a number of things. First off, even someone as great as the Prophet ﷺ set the standard for us that we need to protect ourselves spiritually. We do, because the shaitan is very intrusive in his efforts, very aggressive. As the Quran says, إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ فَاتَّخِذُوهُ عَدُوًّا. And also, the possibility of me becoming weak spiritually is very, very, very possible. So I need to protect myself from the other wicked things that could happen to me, from if I become spiritually weak, right? So this is, you'll find things in the Sunnah that teach us this. Even on the mu'min, there's a sunnah to say Allahu Akbar when you feel a sense of fear overcoming you, or when you see a fire gust or something of the sort, say Allahu Akbar on it, right? So this is to give the believer some sense of spiritual strength, because the devils, the shayateen, they prey off of fear. In actuality, the shaitan is more afraid of the mu'min than the mu'min is of the shaitan. This is the haqiqah. If the mu'min is strong in his iman, the shaitan is very afraid. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, Sayyidina Umar, Ya ibn al-Khattab, ما رآك الشيطان سالكا فجا إلا سلك فجا غير فجك. Whenever the shaitan sees you going down a path, he goes somewhere else. Why? He's too afraid of you. But when the believer feels a sense of fear, right? This is what Surat Al-Jinn actually mentions to us. وَأَنَّهُ كَانَ رِجَالٌ مِنَ الْإِنسِ يَعُوذُونَ بِرِجَالٍ مِنَ الْجِنِّ فَزَادُوهُمْ رَهَقًا. What does rahaqa mean? They increased them in fear and exhaustion. They overwhelmed them physically, right? So this idea of fear is something the shaitan preys upon. And that's why there are these mu'awwadat to protect the believer in his wake and in his sleep. Now, this surah, Surat Al-Falaq, actually speaks to us about something that happened to the Prophet ﷺ. It doesn't mention what happened to the Prophet. The hadith mentions it in detail, but it reminds us of it. And that is, this hadith is in, again, the Kutub al-Sihah. It's the hadith that states that the Prophet ﷺ experienced the effects of black magic, sihr. And the hadith says as follows. He says, the hadith says, سحر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يهودي من يهود بني زريق يقال له لبيد بن الأعصم حتى كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يخيل إليه أنه يفعل الشيء وما يفعله. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم experienced sihr, black magic, by one of the Jews from a tribe called Bani Zurayq. His name was Labid ibn al-A'sam. He was someone who greatly despised the Prophet ﷺ. And so he did this sihr, and the effects of it for the Prophet ﷺ were that he would feel as though he has done something and he did not do it. And it even affected him physically to the point where he felt exhausted by it, and he would sweat, and he would profusely sweat. So this shows you that even someone as great as the Prophet ﷺ experienced the effects of sihr. And this is something very, very possible. Of course, its effects will vary based upon the strength of the iman of the individual and their status with Allah Azza wa Jal. But anyway, and that's what a lot of sihr is about. A lot of sihr is about takhyil, is about creating illusions, is about causing the person to feel things that aren't actually happening. And this is something that's very severe. This is something that's enough to make a person go crazy. Yes, sihr can cause someone to go towards the point of insanity, where they start feeling the presence of something, seeing things, and then they begin to question their own fundamental existence. This is possible, that the person goes to the point of junoon because of sihr. Now, the hadith goes on to say, حتى إذا كان ذات يوم أو ذات ليلة دعا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم دعا ثم قال يا عائشة أشعرت أن الله أفتاني فيما استفتيته فيه جاءني رجلان فقعد أحدهما عند رأسي والآخر عند رجلي فقال الذي عند رأسي للذي عند رجلي ما وجع الرجل فقال مطبوب قال ومن طبه فقال لبيد بن الأعصم. So the hadith says the following. The Prophet ﷺ, it says this happened in either the day or the night. There's different narrations. And it says the Prophet ﷺ made dua. And then he made more dua. And then more dua. The Prophet ﷺ implored Allah Azza wa Jal for guidance on how to deal with this. So then he said, I felt as though Allah gave me the answer. It doesn't say, was the Prophet ﷺ awake or sleeping when this happened? Allahu Alam. We don't know. So anyway, it says that there were two men. One by his head and the other by his feet. And then the hadith says, one said to the other, Ma waja'u rajul. What's wrong with him? So then they said, Matboob. He's ill. He's afflicted. He's afflicted by sihr. Yani. Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah as-salama. He's afflicted. Right? So then the other asked, وَمَنْ طَبَّهُ? Who's the one who afflicted him? So then the answer was, Labid ibn al-A'sam. Now of course this is through wahi. Through wahi. Of course these are not average men. These are likely angels. And very often someone who experiences sihr will never know the one who did it for him. They may have suspicions. Who did it? Was it this person or that person or maybe that one? Allahu A'lam. You don't know. But the Prophet ﷺ was given this information. And then the hadith goes on to say, في أي شيء قال في مشط ومشاطة وجب طلعة ذكر. The hadith says that this sihr was done by the usage of a comb and the hair on it, and also by the stalk of a date palm tree. The stalk of a date palm tree. طلعة ذكر يعني the شجر النخيل يعني. قال فأين هو؟ قال في بئر ذي أروان. بئر ذي أروان. So the hadith said how the sihr was done and where it was placed. فأتاها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في أناس من أصحابه ثم قال يا عائشة والله لكأن ماءها نقاعة الحناء ولكأن نخلها رؤوس الشياطين. He said, the Prophet ﷺ said that this well, the well of Dhirwan, was very putrid in its water. Its water was dark as hinna, and its trees or its stems that were coming around from it were like that of the heads of the shayateen, very knotted, in other words. So, فقلت يا رسول الله أفلا أحرقته فقال لا أما أنا فقد عافاني الله. right? He said, what did you burn the effects of this sihr that was done for you? He said, I didn't. Allah relieved me of it. فَأَمَّا أَنَا فَقَدْ عَافَانِ اللَّهِ. And then he said, وَكَرِهْتُ أَنْ أُثِيرَ عَلَى النَّاسِ شَرًّا فَأَمَرْتُ بِهَا فَدُفِنَتْ. The Prophet ﷺ made sure this well was buried, dirt was put in this well to cover it up so that no one can access this one anymore. So this is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ experiencing sihr. Now, what does that surah actually say? What does the surah actually say? Let's look at it. It says, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ. I seek refuge with the Lord of daybreak. Wait a minute, what's the point of mentioning daybreak? Is the day like the night? Are the two the same time frames? No, they're not. They're not. Day is different than night. Day is different than night. And that's why there's certain there are certain hadith that teach us to be very precautious in the nighttime and in darkness. And even when you're throwing something in darkness, to be mindful and to sammillah and to use the name of Allah Azza wa Jal when you were to throw something in utter darkness so that it doesn't bring you harm. Even the darkness, it's noted, or the darkness of night is noted as a time when the shayateen and the devils, they spread, right? And they do their work. In fact, the hadith says, Ya Aisha, the Prophet ﷺ said to her, Ya Aisha, استعيذي بالله من شر هذا فإن هذا الغاسق إذا وقب. Prophet ﷺ said, seek refuge in Allah from this, referring to the night or referring to the moon. For this is the darkness when it overcomes. This is what Allah refers to when He says, Al-Ghasiq idha waqab, the darkened one as it darkens. So there's a certain way to deal with the night hours, right? In terms of what we do, and in terms of our adhkar and how we sleep and how we rest and all the rest. So what does the surah say? I seek refuge in Allah from the Lord of the daybreak. Right? Because, one of the things that causes fear, again, we said the idea here is that the shaitan or shayateen feed off of fear, right? And one of the things that triggers fear is the unknown. This triggers fear. Because when I can't see it, it causes my body, my emotions to react in different ways. Right? So that's why nightmares are very, very impactful upon the person psychologically. And even the idea of us not being able to see the jinn. إِنَّهُ يَرَاكُمْ هُوَ وَقَبِيلُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا تَرَوْنَهُمْ. Right? He and his followers, the jinn, they see you where you cannot see them. Does this cause fear for the human being? It does. In fact, the hadith tells us that in the early days, the jinn were very, very afraid of human beings. That's why they retreat away to places that are isolated, to places that are abandoned, where there's not a lot of noise and a lot of movement. And they were afraid of human beings because they saw human beings as more powerful than them. But then they realized that the human beings are more afraid of them than they are of human beings. So that's when they felt a sense of power, right? So that's even mentioned also in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So that's a little bit about. So then the next verse says, from the evil of what He has created. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ. And then it says, وَمِنْ شَرِّ غَاسِقٍ إِذَا وَقَبْ. And from the evil of darkness. What is al-ghasiq? As I said, some of them said, al-ghasiq قِيلَ إِنَّهُ اللَّيْلِ وَقِيلَ إِنَّهُ الْقَمَرِ وَالصَّحِيحُ أَنَّهُ عَامٌ لِهَذَا وَهَذَا. أما كونه الليل فلأن الله تعالى يقول أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل. So what is غاسق? It's either referring to the night or referring to the moon, which comes out in the night. So either way, it's referring to both. It's referring to this time frame of darkness that triggers fears within human beings, right? And then the surah after that, after speaking about what triggers fears in human beings, it speaks about two forms of spiritual oppression that human beings do. One of them is وَمِن شَرِّ النَّفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ وَمِن شَرِّ النَّفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ. Now this word nafth, we went over it already. What did we say? النفث نفخ مع تحريك اللسان بدون إخراج ريق, right? فهو أقل من التفل. So nafth is blowing while moving your mouth, moving your tongue, without really bringing out saliva, right? That's what nafth is. فهو أقل من التفل. يفعله السحرة إذا وضعوا علاج سحرهم في شيء وعقدوا عليه عقدا ثم نفثوا عليها. This is referring to the way that magicians do black magic, with knotting things and blowing on it whilst uttering certain utterances, as it describes. And the reason why it says naffathat is feminine. Why did it use the feminine form here? This is referring to something, the reality of Arabia at the time. The reality of Arabia at the time of the revelation was that very often the magicians, or the ones who would do black magic, were females. And that's why it says naffathat versus naffath. Naffathun, right? Naffathun would be male sahara. Naffathat, this is female magicians, right? And the reason why it uses the female here is referring to the ghalib of that time, the prevalent, even though people who do sihr can also be male or female, but it's speaking about what was prevalent at the time. So this is one form of oppression, and that is through sihr. You know, and of course, we're going to get to the subject right now, but let me just finish breaking. We're going to speak about sihr in a little bit more detail and something called ruqya and modern understandings and attitudes towards these spiritual things, sort of. But let me go over the last verse and then we'll get to that inshallah. The last verse is وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. This is referring to the other form, and this is the more prevalent form. This is the more prevalent form of oppression that happens spiritually, and that is through ayn and hasad. Ayn and hasad. Now, Bismillah. Yes. So now so hasad. This is a very, very big subject. This surah only gives one verse about it. Very, very, very big subject that impacts people in so many different ways. What is ayn? What is hasad? But now here the question is, we have in our modern sensibilities, many people today have an aversion to the impact of spiritual things of this nature, right? Many people say, oh, this is superstition. And superstition is something that's definitely possible in this regard. There's a great exaggeration that many people might have on diagnosing their personal problems. So here we have, what we're dealing with here is, we as an ummah, we as believers, we as followers of the Qur'an and Sunnah, we have to balance between two extremes. We have one extreme of superstition that wants to lodge every problem that the person is undergoing and experiencing as being as part of some grand scheme against me, spiritual scheme against me, right? I'm a victim of ayn, and this person, I'm a victim of hasad, and this is happening to me because I'm envied, and that I lost that because I'm envied, and this and that, and it becomes this. It almost becomes this. It becomes like a disease, like this overpowering thought. It becomes this compulsive thought that every time someone goes through something bad, it's because of hasad. Right? Of course, is that bad? Yeah, that's bad. Of course, you're not. There's a process of diagnosis that you're meant to follow before you can even consider arriving at these conclusions. Now, the same thing with sihr and black magic. Often, this extreme the superstitious extreme, again, very often you will find that the diagnosis of people will not end up being black magic or mess, but rather it'll be mental health issues or emotional instability. Very, very common to mistake mental health issues and emotional instability for sihr, mess, or hasad. Very, very easy to do that. And of course, this misdiagnosis would come from someone who has no knowledge of these things. I'm just guessing. Mahad takhmeen. Now, of course, we're not meant to just guess. I'm meant to really try to find solutions to my problems. Now, among the process of diagnosis is for me to figure out, are there stressors? Are there triggers? Well, have I addressed those stressors and have I addressed those triggers? If I haven't, then maybe I should start there. What is causing these realities to unfold in my life? All right, I addressed the stressor and the trigger. Is the problem gone? Then I know it wasn't sihr or hasad. All right, if it's not gone, then maybe perhaps I need to seek medical attention. Go to the doctor. See if there is a medical cause for whatever you're going through. And if the doctor gives you a clear medical explanation, a clear path to curing or medicating your situation, and your problems all go away, then that was your solution. This is no longer an issue of sihr or hasad or mess. If we find situations, and there are many, by the way, if you are not part of this world, then it might be difficult to grasp it. But if you've seen how ruqya is done, then you can understand that there are many people who are suffering out there from issues that did not have a medical resolution or a mental health resolution. But when it gets addressed in a spiritual context through what we just called ruqya, their symptoms go away and they go on living their life as though nothing was wrong. Right? So this is definitely something. So this is one extreme, the extreme superstitious side. Then the other side of it is the extreme maddi side. Some people, they function as though there's nothing called evil eye. What are you talking about, evil eye? Now, when I say evil eye, I don't mean that superstitious blue eye or whatever that the people, a'udhu billah, put on in their cars or in their homes or stuff like that. All of that is from the talasim and those things that aslan compromise a person's faith. If you think an eye is going to protect you and repel the evils of another person away from you, this is a very, very bad sign for a person's iman. Eyes don't protect you. Little tokens that you buy at some gift shop, those don't do anything for you. But this extreme rejection of any spiritual oppression is really, really dangerous in itself. Some people say, what are you talking about, hasad? What are you talking about, sihr? What are you talking about, ayn? No one could do anything to you, unless Allah wills it. That's true. No one could do anything to you unless Allah wills it. But if you predispose yourself to being afflicted by ayn, then don't blame anyone except yourself. There were people during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, is established clearly in the Qur'an and in the Sunnah. These concepts of ayn and hasad and sihr. So if I deny them, in essence, I am denying something that's been affirmed by sure authenticity in my deen. Can't do that. Because again, that's going to call my iman into question. Right? These are not things that, some people say they're true, some people say they're not. As a concept, it's established. Now, in terms of frequency or details, you could raise questions about the frequency that people resort to superstitious attitudes towards things. That's fine. It's true. That's true. But to say that these things don't exist, then you would have to overcome a plethora of evidence that shows us the contrary. Now take a look at this. For example, the Prophet ﷺ for Al-Hasan al-Hussein, again this is an authentic hadith, he would make this dua. Again, the Prophet ﷺ teaches us, fortify yourself spiritually. he would say to Al-Hasan al-Hussein, أعيذكما بكلمات الله التامة من كل شيطان وهامة ومن كل عين لامة. This is an important dua to remember and to learn and to say on yourself and your children every single day. He would say to them, I seek refuge for you both, Hassan and Hussein, with Allah's complete words from every shaitan, وهامة, every shaitan, من كل شيطان وهامة, and this is referring to the influences of the jinn, and also from every ayn, ومن كل عين لامة, and every eye, evil eye that focuses and fixates on you. So this is the Prophet ﷺ teaching us to make this dua daily. And then another dua that the Prophet ﷺ would say, there's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ would say, Bismillahi arqiq. The Prophet would teach us, if you feel afflicted or if something in your body is bothering you, then you put your hand on that place and you say this, Bismillahi arqiq, min kulli da'in yu'dhik, min sharri kulli nafsin aw ayni hasid, Allahu yashfik. Bismillahi arqiq is the dua of the Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ, he would put his hand on the area that's afflicted, and he said, in the name of Allah, I seek ruqya, and I seek healing for you, spiritual healing, from any affliction that harms you. Min sharri kulli nafsin aw ayni hasid, from every envious eye, may Allah protect you. Bismillahi arqiq. And there's another hadith that the Prophet ﷺ even did this on water. So look at this hadith. The hadith says, this sets the precedent of reciting on water for the sake of drinking and showering. رقى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لثابت بن قيس بن شماس في ماء ثم صبه عليه. The Prophet ﷺ did ruqya for Sayyidina Thabit ibn Qais, and he recited it on water, and then he spilled it over him. So, and of course we know that this is actually one of the means of cleansing from hasad, is to take a shower in the effects of the wudu of the one who did hasad. But of course that's hardly ever known, but this is established in the sunnah. Now there's another hadith, the special virtue of Zamzam. Zamzam is also used as a means for spiritual healing. Zamzam, as the Prophet ﷺ said, طعام طعم وشفاء سقم. Zamzam is a means to satiate hunger, and it's also a means to give healing to the ill. This hadith, it's authentic. طعام طعم وشفاء سقم. Right? Now there's another hadith that tells us this. اقرأوا سورة البقرة فإن أخذها بركة وتركها حسرة ولا تستطيعها البطلة. Prophet ﷺ says, read Surat Al-Baqarah, because taking Surat Al-Baqarah is a source of great blessings. You should have Surat Al-Baqarah in your home, recite it in your home, play it in your home. وتركها حسرة. So abandoning Surat Al-Baqarah is a source of great regret. And he says, وَلَا تَسْتَطِيعُهَا الْبَطَلَ يعني السَّحَرَةِ. Those who engage in black magic cannot overpower Surat Al-Baqarah. Surat Al-Baqarah is too strong for them. Now, this is another thing. Now, here, there's another hadith, it's in Bukhari. He says that, and this is actually advice from the shaitan's hadith, where the shaitan gave advice to Abu Hurairah. And the Abu Hurairah came and said this advice to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ said to him, صَدَقَكَ وَهُوَ كَذُوب. Right? So he said to him, إِذَا أَوَيْتَ إِلَى فِرَاشِكَ فَقْرَأْ آيَةَ الْكُرْسِي فَإِنَّهُ لَنْ يَزَالَ عَلَيْكَ مِنَ اللَّهِ حَافِظ وَلَا يَقْرَبُكَ شَيْطَانٌ حَتَّى تُصْبِحَ. Recite Ayat al-Kursi when you get to your bed. Because if you do that, then you will continue to have a sense of protection, and even no shaitan would ever come near you as you have recited Ayat al-Kursi before you sleep. So this is again among many evidences that show us how the Qur'an itself is used as spiritual protection from these things. Now again, the idea of being strongly averse to these things, I've met people who've gone through tests, very, very big tests. Again, these are people who do not believe in, did not believe in these things. The consequence of sihr or mess or hasad. And when they were afflicted in their family with some of these tests, it completely flipped their world upside down. And they did not know what to do or how to handle it until they found a path through ruqya. And then for some of them, Allah Azza wa Jal gave relief and they found their way out of those very, very difficult tests that they were in. So it's one of those things that until you've actually experienced it, you might be a little skeptical, but be very careful. Because the same person who's going to reject sihr or ayn is the same person who's going to reject other things that are miraculous. And we have this problem today. There are some people who have this certain sense of maddiyah, materialism, that any notion of spiritual occurrences is taken with a bitter grain of salt. What do you mean miracles? And this is problematic in terms of iman, because if a person rejects the miracles of the prophets, then they'll leave Islam. They'll leave Islam if they reject the miracles that are clearly established. So this is the problem with this maddiyah. And you know, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us in a way that we have this bridge to the spiritual realm. You know, some people, they get afflicted in their dreams. They see nightmares not once, twice, thrice. It becomes this very regular thing that, you know, causes them a lot of stress. And this is a bridge to the spiritual realm. Is it sometimes psychological? Yes. It's sometimes psychological because the person's dealing with a lot of stress, the person's going through a lot of problems, but sometimes it's due to other things. And that's where this guidance. So what is ruqya for? You guys all heard of this term ruqya, right? Ruqya. Now, spiritual healing. Now, there's a lot of fraudulent behavior in this. You should remember this. That this is not... Ruqya for us as Muslims is something that's done with the Qur'an and Sunnah. Nothing else. But now, there are many who've made their bread and butter off of these things. It's become a business, right? A lot of fraudulent things, sometimes even with dealing with the jinn. Wal-'iyadhu billah. Sometimes you might think someone is a respected person who's going to follow proper measures, but once you could see signs, right? So once someone starts asking for a picture, your birth date, the name of your mother, or stuff like this, and they come back and give you an answer as though they pulled it out of a hat. All right? They're like on the other side of the world. Many people, they see this. It became this marketing thing, right? They market that they do spiritual healing for people. Wal-'iyadhu billah. When it becomes like pulling a diagnosis out of a hat, the guy's never seen me in his life. He's like 3,000 miles away, and he asks for my name and my picture and my mother's name and my birth date. This person is either one of two people. He's either a fraud who wants to make money, or he's someone who deals with the devils. Because we don't have this form of spiritual healing where you're just going to give someone your birth date and they're going to come back and tell you something about your life story and say that, oh, you're afflicted with sihr or something like that. So be very, very careful in this regard, because there's a lot of fraudulent things that are done. Once it becomes with things that are other than the Qur'an and Sunnah and the guidance that's in it, we avoid it. You know, when someone starts going for spiritual healing and there are people using stones or like precious stones or something like that, wal-'iyadhu billah, all of this stuff, we don't believe in this. As Muslims, this is not part of our means towards spiritual healing whatsoever. What is spiritual healing for? It could be for a range of things. Some people automatically, when they hear the word ruqya, oh, you're talking about sihr. But this is not true. The Qur'an is a comprehensive shifa for many different types of things. The more you believe the Qur'an is a possible source of healing, the more that you will find it to be, inshaAllah, that's the case. Because the Qur'an says it. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surat Al-Isra, the verse, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, فيه شفاء وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلَا يَزِيدُ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in it is a shifa, a curing, and a rahmah. Both, not just one. It is shifa, it is a healing, and it is a source of mercy, right? For what? This could be for something like anxiety and stress. The Quran is a healing for that. There is something called ayat al-sakina, the ayat in the Quran that are about tranquility and that they inspire peace. You'll find that there are 6 different locations in the Quran that mention the word sakina. Sakina means tranquility. Each one of them designates that the source of tranquility is from Allah, right? Like one of the verses, فيه سكينة من ربكم فيه سكينة من ربكم ثم أنزل الله سكينته على رسوله. His sakina, فيه سكينة, in it is sakina from your Lord. هو الذي أنزل السكينة في قلوب المؤمنين. He's the one who sent down tranquility on the hearts of the believers. So take this as a general principle. In the Quran, there are 6 verses that reference sakina, meaning tranquility. Each one of them directly links sakina as being from Allah, not from anything else, right? So this is one of the purposes of ruqya. If you're someone with deep anxiety and stress, then ruqya can help you with that. What else is it for? It's for ayn and it's for hasad. Now, there's a slight difference between ayn and hasad. Ayn is referring to hasad that comes from observation, right? Hasad is more general than ayn. Hasad is more general than ayn. It is also a sense of cure from mess. What is mess? That is when the shayateen or the jinn directly harm the human being, not by any command or not by any work of magic or something like that. So this is direct influence from the jinn. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ taught us to be mindful about where we rest and where we throw our garbage and where we and how we deal with abandoned areas, starting in the name of Allah. Why? Because it might be an area in which the jinn reside, and if you harm them, they may retaliate with harming you back, right? So there is this idea of mess, and then the last one is sihr. So when someone would do ruqya, they would do a range of these different verses that affect these different things to see if there is any trigger. And again, ruqya is healing from Allah, not healing from a human being. No human being has this power to snap their fingers and heal you from their problems. No. Allah may use someone to heal you. But does the person heal you? No, it's Allah that heals you. And it's very, very important to remember this. Allah is Ash-Shafi. Allah is the one who cures and heals. And this is a critical point to remember because, again, when you do ruqya, part of it is in the hand of the process, but then the other part is on you. You can't do ruqya and then in your personal life you're doing all of the opposite things, like sinfulness. Sinfulness weakens the person's spiritual barrier, their protection from the shaitan. That's why you will see, the more that the person does sin, the stronger the waswasa and the whispers of the shaitan are upon them. It's a reality. The stronger the person's spiritual focus, you will find that they will be less fazed by the whispers of the shaitan. And so that's another thing. It needs to be a transformation by the person. Because the more I grow spiritually, the less influenced I will be by these things. Right? So this is about ruqya, and this is a general rundown of Surat Al-Falaq. The next one, and it's the last one, Surat An-Nas, is going to transition to speaking to us about the shaitan. So we spoke about the shayateen from among human beings in Surat Al-Falaq. And now in Surat An-Nas, shayateen among the jinn. Before we go to that, does anyone have any comment or question? Anything they'd like to go ahead? Under the cover of darkness. Yeah, of course not inherently evil. The night is a very, very blessed time frame for Qiyamul Layl. The moon itself is a very symbolic miracle of Allah Azza wa Jal. The Prophet ﷺ would be in awe observing the full moon. Right? So no, it's not about the night. It's about what happens over the cover of night, and also the fear that's triggered by the unknown. Because this is, again, human. Part of this is human nature. Basically, if someone, you'll find that those who are more prone to the influence of the shaitan in these things is someone who is very weak in their nafs. You might, so it's two things: spiritual weakness and psychological weakness. If you're psychologically weak, then it makes you very vulnerable in front of the shaitan, because what he preys off of that weakness. And this weakness is triggered by the unknown. When it's dark and I can't see, I get scared. But when it's daylight, I have more confidence because I could see everything, right? So it's just this natural reality of this psychological. So it's possible, and I've seen this, that someone, in terms of their iman, is not very strong. But because they're very psychologically strong, the influence of these things becomes very minimal on them, because they don't allow anything to impact them. They're very, very strong. But still, even with this strength, sometimes they could get influenced. But it plays a role, definitely. Yeah. Any other questions? Comments? Go ahead. Yes. Oh, of course. Of course. It's one of the biggest sins that you could possibly do. Is because you don't get to do these things without sacrificing faith. Very often you end up having to leave Islam, because dealing with the shayateen, to appease the shaitan, you need to undermine what is sacred, the Qur'an sometimes. And a'udhu billah, the people who deal with these things, they have to do very, very crazy things in their dealings with the devil. And the interesting thing about it is that this is we're not just talking about things that are dealing with the Muslim community. Like, I've had one brother who was considering Islam still, and he himself has been afflicted by these things. And again, you see it, these are life-altering things for some people. Yeah, sometimes they end up having schizophrenia or bipolar or something like that. But sometimes it's really from the influence of black magic. Because you'll find, and I don't want to mention those nationalities, but certain nationalities that are not even Muslim are very, very common in dealing with the devils and doing these types of oppression against others. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. Yeah. وَإِيَّاكُمْ. And there's actually a hadith, it's important to note this. Sometimes people go to fortune tellers. What's the ruling of going to a fortune teller? The Prophet ﷺ said this: "Man ata arrafan fasaddaqahu faqad kafara bima unzila ala Muhammad." Whoever goes to a fortune teller and believes in what he says, he has disbelieved in what has been revealed to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's how severe it is. And so if you go to the fortune teller and don't believe him, that's a major sin in itself. But if you believe him, this may even lead you outside of Islam, will lead you to kufr. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. Any other comments or questions about this subject before we go to Surat An-Nas? Any other? Go ahead. Yes. It's possible. So there are stories. So there's one story, again, by direct source, not second-hand source or third-hand source, that I'm aware of someone who threw something in a direction without naming Allah, and then suddenly something flipped with him. His family didn't know what happened. And they took him to someone who does ruqyah, and the shaitan, or the devil within him, spoke on his tongue and said, this is what happened. Actually, this happened during the time of the Prophet ﷺ too, by the way. That one of the companions did something that harmed a jinn, and he retaliated back and he killed him. And then the Prophet ﷺ, there was this judgment that happened because the Prophet ﷺ was able to communicate to human beings and to jinn. This is a hadith, it's in the authentic hadiths. So that's possible. Now, this whole idea of quote-unquote haunted house, is it possible for a house to be maskoon, inhabited by jinn? It is possible. Especially if the house is an abandoned house or an old house or something of the sort. Sometimes the shayateen are attracted to someone who's engaging in sin. And sometimes in very illicit acts that the person may do in their privacy, or like in the midst of heated arguments and yelling and tension that brings the devils. Sometimes that mess might happen in a heat of anger, in the performance of a sin or something of that sort. So it is possible. But again, generally speaking, there is a protective covering for the human being from alam al-jinn. He either keeps this protective covering, the spiritual protect covering, or he diminishes it. And if he diminishes it, there's no telling how bad it'll ruin this person's life. Yeah. There's a range. There's a range of there's a range of symptoms, and in general, I would advise someone to get ruqya to verify. Sometimes it's excessive exhaustion, excessive sleeping. Sometimes it's unprecedented or inexplicable anger. Sometimes it causes these range of emotions, like people get angry. I'm used to getting angry. But inexplicable anger is something else. Like why? Sometimes you might see it. Like I don't know what is causing this. Is making this person get extremely angry or extremely sad, or seeing a lot of nightmares. Sometimes it could be a sign. And sometimes again, if it's full blown, where the person loses control over their faculties, sometimes they might not even remember what they did. They might not remember what they did. They might begin to act in animalistic ways or do things, and then once they wake up out of their trance, then they don't even remember what happened. So there's a range of things. Wallahu alam. Any other questions, comments about it? Anything else? Good? Okay. Alhamdulillah. Let's go to Surat An-Nas. Surat An-Nas. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. These are the last verses of this blessed juz' that we've been going through. And this gives us a roadmap or a guideline on how to protect ourselves from the shaitan. Right? Now, there are a few things to note about this surah. The first thing is, again, it's one of the surahs that starts with Qul. And this is Allah teaching the Prophet to teach us as an ummah. This is the procedure you should follow to seek refuge, true refuge from the shaitan. Don't seek refuge in yourself because you are weak. This is what I'm reminded through this. This surah humbles me. I'm not fighting the shaitan with my strength. I'm fighting it with the strength of Allah Azza wa Jal. And that's why it says, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِنَفْسِي بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ, with the Rabb of the Nas. And again, the usage of this term, Rabb, is a very, it's a term of endearment, right? Who is a Rabb? He's the one who tends to the needs of people in every stage of their growth. So when I'm seeking refuge in my Rabb, I'm seeking refuge in the one who knows my ins and outs, everything about me, right? If he says in the comments on this, look, Ibn Kathir, he says this: هذه الصفات من صفات الرب عز وجل الربوبية والملك والإلهية فهو رب كل شيء ومليكه وإلهه. فهو رب كل شيء ومليكه وإلهه فجميع الأشياء مخلوقة له مملوكة عبيد له. فأمر المستغيث أن يتعوذ بالمتصف بهذه الصفات من شر الوسواس الخناس. Look, what are you seeking refuge in, or who are you seeking refuge in? You're seeking refuge in Ar-Rabb. That's the one, as I said, who tends to the needs of his creation. And I'm seeking refuge in Al-Malik. Who's Al-Malik? He's the sovereign. He's the king of kings. He's the one who everything in this universe is his subject. We're all subjects of Allah Azza wa Jal, right? Malik Nas. I am a subject of Allah, not of the shaitan. The shaitan himself is a subject of Allah, created by Allah Azza wa Jal. بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ مَلِكِ النَّاسِ. And then he says, إِلَهِ النَّاسِ. What does إِلَهِ النَّاسِ mean? He said, Ilah refers to al-ma'bud bihaq, the one who is deserving of worship. The one who is deserving of worship, al-ma'budu bihaq. So, when I seek refuge in Allah, I seek refuge in Him through these three. I am seeking refuge in Him because He's aware of my most intimate thoughts, and because I belong to Him, and because He's the one who is most deserving of worship. You see the three? Again, the Quran is not random. The Quran is not random. These are three meanings that I bring to mind as I am seeking protection from the shaitan. Rabb, Malik, Ilah. And then after that, after recognizing maqam Allah, raising Allah's status up, I'm going to lower the shaitan's status down. Right? Min sharri al-waswas al-khannas. From the evils of the retreating whisperer. The retreating whisperer. And again, so there's this dynamic. If Allah humiliated the shaitan, don't raise him up. Right? If Allah humiliated the shaitan, don't raise him up. Realize that he's al-khannas. Don't raise him up. Look, there's this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It's in Musnad Imam Ahmad. Look at what it says. The hadith says, a companion, he is narrating this, says, كنت رديف النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم على حمار فعثر الحمار فقلت تعس الشيطان فقال لي النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تقل تعس الشيطان فإنك إذا قلت تعس الشيطان تعاظم في نفسه وقال صرعته بقوتي فإذا قلت بسم الله تصاغرت إليه نفسه حتى يكون أصغر من الذباب. Look at the Prophet ﷺ said. So he was riding with the Prophet on a donkey, right? And this donkey lost its step. It lost its footing, it slipped. So then this man naturally reacted and he said, تعس الشيطان. Like many of us say today, يلعن الشيطان or يلعن الشيطان, right? لعنة الله على الشيطان. Right? They'll say this a lot. So the Prophet ﷺ said, don't say that. Don't say تعس الشيطان. What's تعس الشيطان mean? Meaning you're praying that the shaitan fails. It's a dua. خبر يراد به الإنشاء. يعني اللهم اجعله تعيسا. That's basically what you're saying. Hopefully he fails. Because in other words, the Prophet ﷺ said to him, don't say this. Because if you say this, the shaitan will see himself as great. As though he's the one who caused this problem to happen to you. Right? So next time you break something, don't say, ينعل shaitan. Don't say, damn the devil. No. Say what? Say instead, as the Prophet ﷺ said, Bismillah, Bismillah is better than saying an shaitan. Say in the name of Allah. You drop something, glass, it breaks. What did he say? Bismillah. Bismillah. Because when you say ta'is al-shaitan, you're giving the shaitan value. You're giving him too much of a space. Sometimes people do this. They make everything bad in their life happening. Why? Because of the shaitan. No. Minni wa min ash-shaytan. I did this. Shaitan, I'm not going to give him all this power, this big space, so that he could see himself as great. No. The Prophet ﷺ said, when you say Bismillah, in the name of Allah, the shaitan is humiliated until he becomes smaller than a fly. That's what this hadith says. And so basically, I hope this is one of the lata'if, one of the subtle things. This juzu has showed us a lot of subtle things. All the surahs we went through. Man, if you go back to it, it's as though, if you read it with this ayah, it's as though you've never read Juzu Amma before in your life. All these meanings that are hidden in it. Next time you read Surat An-Nas, what's the key takeaway that I'm giving you guys here from this surah? This surah is giving me a roadmap to overpower the shaitan. How does this happen? Raise Allah's maqam up, bring the shaitan's maqam down. That's what Surat An-Nas is doing, right? قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ مَلِكِ النَّاسِ إِلَهِ النَّاسِ مِنْ شَرِّ الْوَسْوَاسِ الْخَنَّاسِ. I'm recognizing that the shaitan, as soon as I remember Allah, he retreats and he flees away. Right? That's how we should do it. That's when أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. That's what does it mean? Shaitan, where does it come from? Shaitan. So we know that shaitan, he's referred to as Iblis as well. And he is also referred to as Al-Gharur in the Quran, the one who causes deception. Al-Gharur is the deceiver, right? So Iblis is his name, right? Shaitan, where does it come from? They say it comes from either shata or shatana. Shata يعني ba'uda, right? He's someone who's very distant from goodness, right? Or shatana, either from shata or shatana. What does shatana come from? This refers to his tard. He is someone who is banished from Allah's mercy. This is what also ar-rajim means. It's an emphasis of that. He is banished from rahmatillah azza wa jal. So the trick here to overpowering the shaitan is for me to humble my nafs. It's not me, it's Allah who will do away with the shaitan. Hey, guys over there, lower your voice. It's not me, it is Allah. Secondly, the greater Allah is in my eyes, the smaller the shaitan will be. So if I'm feeling that the influence of waswas is becoming too big, then maybe I need to magnify Allah's glory in my eyes. I need to do the adhkar, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, subhanallah, these things that elevate Allah's maqam in my eyes. So the more the shaitan, the more Allah Azza wa Jal's maqam is raised, the more the devil will be humbled. And this is why Surat An-Nas teaches us this. من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. So this surah finishes off by recognizing that the shaitan secretly whispers in the hearts of people, and this shaitan comes from jinn and he comes from human beings as well, right? So this is, and look, when it comes to dealing with the shaitan and his deception, there are many ayat in the Quran and a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ that warn us about this. Look what the Quran says, إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌ فَاتَّخِذُوهُ عَدُوًّا. Shaitan's your enemy, take him as your enemy, right? إنما يدعو حزبه ليكونوا من أصحاب السعير. There are many methods he employs. He makes things, he beautifies them and makes them attractive. تالله لقد أرسلنا إلى أمم من قبلك فزين لهم الشيطان أعمالهم. Shaitan made it look beautiful to them, right? Shaitan triggers certain things within the son of Adam. Procrastination, طول الأمل. We spoke about this in our class on Sunday. Procrastination, delay of goodness. عليك ليل طويل, as the shaitan comes to the son of Adam when he wants to wake up for Salat al-Fajr. Deception, as we said, he is referred to as al-Gharur. أن الشيطان يجري من ابن آدم مجرى الدم. تحقير الذنوب, undermining sin, is another method that he employs. Another method he employs is causing despair or triggering rage and anger, right? As we know from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, استب رجلان عند النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فجعل أحدهما يغضب ويحمر وجهه فنظر إليه النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال إني لأعلم كلمة لو قالها لذهب عنه ما يجد. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, this man, he was yelling and he was arguing, and his facial appearance began to change. His face became very red and he was enraged. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I know a word, if he says it, all of this is going to dissipate. That is, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. I seek refuge in Allah Azza wa Jal from the shaitan. He triggers false hopes as well. وغرتكم الأماني حتى جاء أمر الله وغركم بالله الغرور. False hopes. And many other tools that the shaitan employs to misguide the son of Adam. But again, the end of it here is Surat An-Nas in a nutshell. Surat An-Nas, what is it teaching me in a nutshell? It is teaching me that my protection from the shaitan is by realizing maqam Allah Azza wa Jal. Again, I'm going to humble my nafs and I'm going to realize that I'm calling upon Rabb al-Nas and Malik al-Nas and Ilahi al-Nas. And on the other end, I'm going to put down the shaitan and humiliate him. Min sharr al-waswas al-khannas. If I realize this, then the shaitan's influence will be very, very minimal upon me. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to protect us from shayateen al-ins wal-jinn. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from all spiritual ailments and afflictions. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better us and strengthen our iman and give us true iman and yaqeen. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma ameen. With this, as we said, our course on Juz' Amma finished. And inshallah ta'ala we'll take a break for August and we'll resume with something new in September inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Subhanakallahumma hamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Inshallah we're going to have adhan now and then Salat al-Isha. Jazakumullah khair.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah.